Hi, this is Lisa with Holland Designs Crochet. I'd like to show you today my beautiful new silver fox throw. I've just completed the sample. This is a bit of a variation of some patterns I did last year. I had a pattern called the Squish Factor and also one called the You Had Me at Crochet Afghan, and it has a very similar textured, very squishy fabric, and it is this one also is reversible. So basically my idea was to take that similar stitch concept that I used in those other patterns, which I loved, and create this sort of a checkered design where the textures were alternating. So you can see how beautiful it turned out, and it did take me a little bit of time to think it through and figure out how to get this look, and it's really lovely. I did work this sample using a size 4 medium worsted weight yarn and a K-hook, and I also, this beautiful yarn I used actually was a acrylic and wool blend, so it's really lovely and soft, and nice weight to it, of course, because it does have that reversible squishy fabric texture to it. You can see this is a beautiful silver gray color that I used. It has a nice sheen to it as well, so it turned out very lovely. So I'm going to do a video demo as well, just to make sure that you're clear on how to work the stitches. It's an intermediate level pattern and is made using some basic stitches, just basically half double crochets and front post half double crochets and double crochets. So I will just go ahead and do a video demo for you so you can get started with this pattern. It is made to measure, so you can use yarn and hook of choice and make it to any dimensions. I began working on the silver fox throw, just a swatch here so I can demonstrate it for you. So row 1 was simply a row of single crochets, and then I'm working on row 2 at the moment, and row 2 has sets of 12 stitches, and they're repeated across the row. So the math for this pattern is given in row 1, and you need to begin with a multiple of 24 chains plus 1 additional chain, and I've listed in the pattern what my starting chain was for my sample. So the sample blanket was a full-size Afghan, approximately 50 inches wide by 70 inches long, and so you can vary the size as you choose. But for this swatch, I just began with chain 25 and then did my 24 single crochets on row 1. And row 2, I've done 12 half double crochets and 12 double crochets. So now I'm ready to begin row 3. So row 3 is where the texture begins to develop, and I've done a chain 1 turn. Now I'm skipping this first double crochet, and I'm working 2 front post half double crochets around the next post. So 2 around that same post, and then skipping the next double crochet, and again working 2 front post half double crochets around the next post, and just repeat that over all 12 of those double crochets. So I'm doing that repetition 6 times. So my stitch count remains the same over on all rows, and so when I skip a stitch, that's a decrease, and when I work 2 stitches around 1 stitch, that's an increase. So that's how our stitch count remains the same. You can see that texture beginning to develop there. And then for the half double crochets, our texture, let me finish my last repetition here. You can count those ridges as well to make sure you've done it properly. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so 12 stitches. And then for across the half double crochets, the texture we're creating is a ribbing. So we're working double crochet in back loop only of each of those half double crochets across the rest of those 12 stitches. So that creates the ribbing. And then row 4, when we get to that, it's just a repetition of row 3. So once you get this basic row 3 memorized, that is the row you'll be working throughout the entire pattern. So it's quite a simple pattern to memorize. Okay, so that is my completed row 3. And I'll just come back and show you what row 4 looks like. Okay, also then doing row 4, it's just the same as row 3. So I did a chain 1 turn. I'm going to do skip 1 stitch and then do 2 half double crochets around the post of the next double crochet. So again, skip 1 and then 2 front post half double crochets around the next post. Just repeat that across. So the only thing that you want to pay attention to with these is that you're skipping the correct number of stitches in between and then working the correct number of stitches around each post so that your stitch count is accurate. And then just make sure you've worked all 6 sets of stitches. So you've got your first 12 of that part of the pattern. You can see how that texture is developing there. And that's the opposite to the reverse side, which has got the ribbing. So it's always going to be opposites. This is how we're creating a bit of a checkerboard pattern. And then we're going to want to go ahead and work the last 12 stitches. And again, working in back loops only. And we're going to do double crochet in back loops only of the next 12 stitches. And again, here we're just going to want to pay attention to our stitch count and make sure we have 12 stitches for this section of the pattern. And that's the only way that you could possibly make a mistake really in this pattern, is simply to have the wrong stitch count for some reason. So it's nothing too complicated, and you can see the actual repetition of this row 3 is really simple and easy to memorize. So that's the end of row 4. So it builds pretty quickly as well. So I'll just start row 5 again and just show you one more time. We're doing 2 front post half double crochets around the post of that second double crochet, skip 1, 2 front post half double crochets, skip 1. So yeah, it's very repetitive. So the silver fox throw got its name from the color of the yarn, and also my daughter Holland, she chose that name. Where I come from in Wisconsin, in a small town of Hamburg, is where historically there was a very famous fox farm. The Fromm brothers fox fur farm was there, and it was before my time, but it was back in the days of my grandparents, and I think about around the 1920s and 30s maybe. And of course, fox fur is not something that's really sold nowadays or that's being used by anyone, but back in those days it was very popular, and they had a silver fox that they bred there, I believe. So silver fox is a very beautiful animal. If you look up an image of a silver fox online, you can see it's just a very lovely, beautiful type of fox. And so that's where this name comes from as well. So it's a bit of a nod to some of my family heritage and where I come from in Wisconsin. So it's always nice to have a little bit of a meaning to a pattern or to the name of a pattern. Okay, so that was again the finished row. And the one thing you're going to want to do as well is, as you're working your rows, you may want to just mark off which row you're on. If you don't want to have to go back and count how many rows you had completed, just because it may be a little bit difficult for you to see exactly, because of so many textures in the pattern, which row you were actually on. So that's one thing I did as well when I was making the sample, is I made sure that I kept track of where I was in the pattern. You're going to want all the blocks, obviously, in the pattern to be the same size so that you have that uniform effect. So I will just finish this row, and then I'll come back and show you how we reverse the texture to create the checkerboard design. I've just completed row 10 of the pattern, and I fastened off. So in the pattern it says at the end of row 10, do not turn your work. So you'll fasten off, but you will not turn your work. You'll simply leave it with that side facing, and you're going to rejoin your yarn at the opposite end of that row that you just completed, you're going to start with a double crochet, so a joining double crochet in the first half double crochet of that row. So that these are front post half double crochets that you would have worked. You're going to join with a double crochet through both loops, and you're just going to work a double crochet in all of those stitches. So you'll be working a total of 12 double crochet across the first 12 front post half double crochets of that row. So we're basically reversing the texture that we did on the previous block. So I refer to this each section as a block. So this is the beginning of block 2. So once you work all 12 double crochets, then you switch your texture again and you begin working, skip 1 double crochet and then 2 front post half double crochets around the next post. So on the first block that we worked, we began each row with the front post half double crochet stitches and then ended the row repetition with the double crochets. And so this is a reversed stitch pattern. So exactly the same stitching, but just a reversal of what we had done previously. And so you will have to fasten off at the end of each block and then rejoin your yarn. So that's how we do the 2 front post half double crochets at the end of that row, and then chain 1 turn, and again continue with our repetition, working double crochet in back loops only of the first 12 stitches. So from this point we're doing back loops only again. And so it is just the same stitch repetition, but just again an opposite effect to what we had on the first block. And so you just continue in the same manner for this entire pattern, and keeping track of how many rows you've worked so that you're sure that all your blocks are the same height, and also paying attention to the stitch counts so that you have the sets of 12 stitches for each section of the texture. Okay, so I've got my 12 double crochets, and then I move on to my front post half double crochet. So it takes a few rows for you to begin to see the textures developing again for the second block. And because you do have to fasten off at the end of each block, you will obviously have a few ends to weave in at the end, but I think it's worth it for the effect that we have here. I don't mind sewing in a few ends once I've finished this blanket. So I did work on this one. It took me approximately 4 weeks, I'd say, to complete my sample.